Well, looking at the Northeast, the very word Northeast in India, Northeast of India, itself shows that how the chicken neck actually we are, and it shows that how we are being, distinguished, or we are being actually, even in the definition of the sentence, that it looks like we are totally kind of, separation from that. But since after the Northeast joined and became the part of India, we were being welcomed by so-called the Armed Forces Special Power Act 1958. And the very act was actually enforced by the British colonial during the time of Quit Indian movement in 15 August 1942. So the same act that has been actually enforced when our brothers Nagas and when our brothers of the Northeast, Manipur, Assam, and Mizoram, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, and Meghalaya, we were all actually being given the special gift that give the license to kill to the indigenous people, that give the license, that so-called the black law, where this law cannot be actually challenged, where this law cannot be booked under the law. So this itself is a very draconian law that has actually destroyed the right of the indigenous movement. The very word, the human rights, identity, and the respect itself is being violated. So therefore, today we could see why the India government is enforcing us these black laws, draconian law. Is basically to stop the movement, to stop to raise our voice, to stop to raise talking about our identity of the Northeast people, to stop to talk about our culture, to stop to talk about our land and territory and our all the cultural system and traditions. That is how one can actually suppress and stop your economic to develop yourself. We were once upon a time a very self-reliance and having our own culture, having our own constitution, having our own, currency and so on and so forth. Where that point of time, the government of India, the order India is being, ruled by the Britisher. So now we could understand how this kind of aggressions and the kind of the conquering actually is taking place. One of the reasons why the Northeast is being enforced this Armed Forces Special Power Act is they don't need the people of Northeast, but what they require is the natural resources. Where without the Northeast natural resources, India can never become a powerful country in the world. So therefore, even if I would like to recall when the Mahatma Gandhi wants to actually avoid Northeast India, the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who actually requested the Mahatma Gandhi, saying that if we exclude Northeast India, then India will never ever to become a powerful country in the world. So therefore, they said Northeast is important for us. Why? Because Northeast is having a natural resources, full of natural resources. Now, in order to stop and in order to destroy and curtail our right and our movement and our self-determination movement, they had used this force. But one of the other thing is that although this Armed Forces Special Power Act is being given license to the only in the Indian Army, but we could also see even the paramilitary forces using this act as well. So we could see how this act is parallel is being used, and we have seen thousands and thousands of our innocent indigenous people were killed and were disappears and rape and torture and so on and so forth, even today. But if one has to question today why the Armed Forces Special Power Act is still existing in the Northeast, it is not because of the armed movement and armed struggle, but it is because they want to extract the natural resources, because people are still resisting and struggling to actually preserve and protect our land and territory, our custom, our culture, our identity, our language. So therefore, in order to suppress this movement, in order to oppress this movement, they still continue to use this Armed Forces Special Power Act. Because recently we have seen in Nagaland the people how they were being killed, and where the entire Northeast people came together, and where the entire people of the world came together, and we condemn the act of the Indian Army. Now today we are not against the army, we are not against any forces, but we are against the kind of policy that is being enforced to kill its own citizen. Now one can question what is the difference between the armed group, terrorists so-called, and the army. They are all in uniform and they carry the arm and ammunition in their hand. But what we understood and what we understand is that Indian army is to protect its own citizens, is to protect its own land and territory and integrity and security of the country. But today we have seen it is they who kill its own citizen. It is they who acquire and grab the land of its own citizens. So these citizens, indigenous people of the Northeast, is never being, holistically being accepted as a human being, as a indigenous people in the Northeast. So that is the crux of all this kind of, marginalization and discrimination that is being actually made towards the Northeast people. So today, we would like to tell to our audience and into this whole 1 month campaign that we can no longer accept at this globalization, at this civilization, stage to welcome this kind of army who really kill its own citizens, who really kills its own culture, who really destroys the language and identity and the land and territory. Today we have to stand together to fight for our justice. If there is no justice, there cannot be peace. So we don't want the violence to take place. We always would like to bring the peace and harmony and want to live as with a dignity as other people are living in the rest of the world. Why the indigenous people has to be, have to be suppressed and oppressed and suffer every now and then, and fight for our justice, fight for our rights, fight for our self-determination, fight for our language, fight for our culture, fight for our clothes, our language, and so on and so forth. So this is something very aggressive that is being actually, operated by the Indian Army, because it is just because of the wrong policy. Now, you could understand when India quit movement of independence is taking place in the gates of India, that is in Mumbai, in Maharashtra, the British have used this act. But today we are asking you, India itself has suffered in such kind of operations and suppressions. But today, why you want to use the same act towards the Northeast people? So we are asking and urging that you should not use this kind of draconian law. You can use with certain better policy where the human rights is being respected, where the indigenous people are being respected, where our indigenous women and children and youth are being respected, and our land, our rights should be respected. And we would like to live with dignity. We don't want to live with a kind of slavery, that kind of atrocity being actually, committed towards the indigenous people. So therefore, we are against this draconian law, and we urge the India government, and also we urge the entire nations to understand this kind of operations, this kind of suppression using the Armed Forces Special Power Act, which is a draconian law, where you cannot even challenge in the eye of law, is injustifying, and you cannot treat these organizations in that manner. Now, if you are still treating the indigenous people in that manner, then what is the use of having so-called the human rights? So the very human rights is understood that human rights is inherent right, but these inherent rights are being violated and being disrespected. And that is where the Northeast people is a loving, peaceful, loving people, and we are culturally diverse and having lot of our, traditions where we love each other, where we enjoy. In spite of our suppressions, oppression, still we learn to live in peace and harmony. Still, we don't want to be violent. Still, we don't want to, use that kind of, hatred and that kind of force. But we want to have a very peaceful process life, and we can solve this kind of, problem with a peaceful process sitting in a round table. And please consider the indigenous people of Northeast into a dialogue where we can really solve. But what you need to understand is you need to understand the root cause of why the Northeast has known us to be a conflict. But today, I'm proudly saying, and I want to tell the whole nations, the whole globe, that Northeast people is not a conflict area. Northeast people is a peace-loving people where we are having a diverse culture, having a different folk, and having a different, culture where we learn to live with a peace and harmony, and where we respect the human rights today. But it is a policy, it is a system that has institutionalized and has brought into this kind of conflict. And it is not we, the Northeast people, who is responsible, but it is the policymakers, it is the government of India who has used this dragon law. They are the responsible of making the conflict and violating the human rights. And as I would like to share in the last, before I end, see, human rights violations is a violations that is being only committed by the state actor. But if people question what about the other non-state actor when they commit a human rights, and I say that is not a human rights violation, but that is a crime. And but when the crime is not being given justice and being and punished to the perpetrator, that point of time it becomes a human rights violation. So it is the responsible of the state of using this force to kill the innocent people, to rape the innocent people of the indigenous people in the Northeast. That's why the Northeast people stand together and is still fighting for our right and for our identity, and for our culture and for our land and territory. I think, Paul, this is how, since you are giving me only the 5 minutes, I think the 5 minutes is over. So therefore, I would like to conclude here. And if there is a question hour, yes, you're all most welcome. And thank you very much. Thank you once again.